entrepreneurship may not have really worked in Singapore, possibly because of the government. Do you think that there is a social cultural psyche? Singaporeans prefer structures, rules, and conformity, and are therefore non-entrepreneurial? Or has the efficiency and intervention of the Singapore government damaged the entrepreneurial spirit in Singapore?
We have looked after everybody's needs, and people are comfortable. And being an entrepreneur means taking a risk. And requires effort. So not many have taken the risk or made the effort.
Today, Singapore is hailed as the Silicon Valley of Asia. It is the crown jewel of Southeast Asian tech, a magnet for global venture capital and high-end talent. But despite its success, Singapore has never produced a global household name. No Google, no Apple, no legendary entrepreneur whose name carries weight in every corner of the earth. While the world sees a tech utopia, Lee Kuan Yew, the late founding father of Singapore, saw its limitations. These are the reasons he believed Singapore would always struggle to produce a homegrown entrepreneurial champion.
Singapore is now trying to make a concerted effort to enhance innovation and creativity. And how do you think we are doing in that dimension? And what more measures can Singapore take to become more innovative?
I think if they can think of anything, please tell the government.
Let's start with the most basic constraint, the one that no amount of government policy can fully overcome: size. You see, Singapore's domestic market is simply too small to support a world champion. Startups here don't have the luxury of gradual growth. They must go global from day one, an incredibly steep mountain to climb.
That the small size of Singapore's domestic market and the general weakness in the economies of the region have made it more difficult for startups to grow without exporting. Those seeking funding, therefore, have to demonstrate an ability to penetrate global markets.
When critics pointed out that small European nations like Sweden and Finland had produced global titans, Lee's rebuttal was immediate. First, let me tell you their advantage. They have the European market. The European Union entitles them to use that market. So you're drawing talent from a bigger manpower base, and that is a great advantage. Lee's point was simple. The Nordics weren't small in the way Singapore is. Despite their population size, they held unique structural advantages and full access to a frictionless single market of 450 million wealthy consumers in Europe.
But Finland has produced Nokia, and Sweden, IKEA. Let's say these are companies which seem to punch way above what the country's physical size seems to suggest.
All right. Sweden, IKEA. Do we want to go into that? Have we got the wood and the designers? The Swedes are good designers.
You see, Singapore, by contrast, sits in the heart of Southeast Asia. While it's one of the fastest growing regions on Earth, the geographic reality is far more brutal. Its neighbours are fragmented, separated by different languages, laws, inconsistent infrastructure, and vastly lower purchasing power. Lee understood that producing a global champion in the region wasn't realistic. American tech titans like Google were built in a domestic market of 330 million people, fueled by a massive talent pool and a deeply embedded culture of risk. As Lee put it, how often can we produce a Bill Gates? We are 3 million Singaporeans. The Chinese are 1.3 billion, and yet they are not as innovative as the Americans. India too. But even when Singaporean companies do break through and build something genuinely world-class, the global competitive environment has a way of swallowing them whole. Take creative technology. In the 90s, they were everywhere. Their Sound Blaster cards were the global industry standard, and they were bold enough to challenge Apple for the future of portable music. This was a genuine global leader, built in Singapore by Singaporeans. But today, they are a shadow of their former selves, proving just how quickly the global machine can grind down an upstart.
You're always competing across the board. So unless you're big enough to be on top of the pile in that particular industry, you're going to play a secondary role. You take Singapore. Creative. It was a trailblazer. But look at the trials and tribulations it had to go to. Silicon Valley, recruit people there, keep up with the competition, because we don't have the critical mass of talent. And in the end, all it's got now is MP3, right? The Sound Blaster and so on. Other companies have caught up. What is the future? I don't know.
You see, Lee understood that competing against markets with deeper talent pools and infinite capital was a war of attrition. But his second example, Di Yijia, the homegrown pastry firm that scaled to the US, is even more telling.
Well, you take food and beverages, Di Yijia, doing well. In that particular field, popiah, skins, a few odd things. But once it begins to succeed in America, it'll be taken over by PepsiCo. How do I know? Because I've attended PepsiCo meetings. They invited me as one of the participants. And they have collected all the foodstuffs around the world. And the outlets are in Latin America, all the cinemas around the world. So you come up with a good product, they pay you, take over.
While Lee's specific prediction didn't actually come true as the company remains independent and Singaporean to this day, his logic still stands. In a globalized economy, the giants aren't interested in a fair fight, but rather taking out the competition before they can grow big. We see this pattern everywhere. Singapore's Tiger Beer was absorbed by the Dutch giant Heineken in 2012. In tech, Facebook simply wrote a check to buy out Instagram and WhatsApp. This is just the cold mechanics of a globalized market in capitalism.
What the argument also seems to suggest is if you are a small country with limited resources, necessarily you can't produce, a world champion in manufacturing because eventually you will be eclipsed.
Yeah, you'll be taken over if you're successful, long before you get to world class. There'll be a company that is already eyeing all these possible takeovers.
Lee understood that in a global war of attrition, no one is safe. Even dominant multi-billion-dollar titans can be ground down by the sheer velocity of the market. He pointed to Nokia, then the undisputed king of mobile phones, and predicted that even they would eventually be ground down by the rising competition.
Nokia was, one of these flukes in history. From a controlled society overshadowed by the Soviet Union, they broke through. But they are about 7-8 million? Can they keep up with the competition from Korea, from Japan? Watch it in the long term.
But even worse, there is a deeper threat that Singapore faces: brain drain. Lee knew that Singapore's best and brightest would eventually be pulled toward the same gravity that swallowed the companies. It's not just a struggle for local businesses to expand, it's a struggle to keep the creators of those businesses at home. He stated, "Many of our best students go to America. They are headhunted by the big companies and don't come back. Without my generation, there would be no such present Singapore. It's Goh Keng Swee, S. Rajaratnam, Lim Kim San who helped build this place. In today's world, they would probably go to America and get a job with Microsoft and not come back."
I mean, I take this present generation, the preoccupation with wealth. They open Fortune 500, all the billionaires. They open Forbes, so many multi-billionaires. So many dot-com chaps have made billions out of nothing. They're just completely swept away by all this. So we've got young administrative officers who've served 6-7 years. Can I take no pay leave? Whilst the dot-com companies are hot, I want to try. If I were now 20 years old, I might be joining the dot-com venture capitalists.
Particularly being a mischievous sort.
Yeah, and I probably make $1 million or $2 million. I'm not sure that I'll be wanting to do this job.
Next, Lee explained that Singapore's constraints weren't just geographical, they're also cultural. You see, Singapore's population is majority Chinese, and Chinese culture traditionally puts scholarship and the civil service above entrepreneurship. It valorizes the stable path. Study hard, pass the exam, and secure a seat in a prestigious institution.
Traditional Chinese societies have valued first the scholar, Shi. Second, the farmer, Nong. Third, the worker, Gong. And fourth and last, the merchant, Shang. This is the social hierarchy of an agricultural society and has not changed much in popular culture. For generations, bright young Chinese chose the path of scholarship, and through the imperial examination system became mandarins. The same values prevailed in Japan and Korea, both influenced by Confucian culture. Even in present-day China, Japan, and Korea, many of the best graduates of their top universities go for a job in government rather than join a private company or start business on their own. And so this has been in Singapore.
Additionally, Lee understood that the lack of entrepreneurship was largely a structural problem. In the early days, Singapore was forced to build the economy itself, simply because a private sector capable of doing so didn't yet exist.
I had a number of highly successful entrepreneurial ministers, Goh Keng Swee, Hon Swee Sen, Lim Kim San. They launched new enterprises. Goh started a shipping line with government officers and a Pakistani shipping expert to guide them. When Malaysia and Singapore Airlines was broken up, we started Singapore Airlines, headed by some outstanding civil servants. We did it out of necessity, and we did not consider it unusual that government ministers acted as entrepreneurs, selecting the most promising and energetic of our officers to run these new companies.
In contrast, Lee observed that Chinese entrepreneurs in Indonesia and Malaysia were driven by a different reality. They weren't smarter, they were simply forced into the market by the harsh edge of racial politics. Barred from the civil service and state institutions, they had no safety net.
In Indonesia and Malaysia, the Chinese are by and large excluded from the bureaucracy and the armed forces. So the energetic and resourceful Chinese have become successful businessmen and entrepreneurs. In Singapore, many of those who are most likely to succeed have been inducted into politics, the bureaucracy, the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Hence, too few are in business on their own, and even fewer are entrepreneurs.
Lee, recognizing all this, was blunt. Singaporeans were too comfortable. To produce a world-class winner, the people had to stop seeking the safe path and start embracing the risk of failure.
Some of our energetic and resourceful and able people must go into business and not stay in salaried jobs. This is a change of culture, of values, of mindset. It will not be easy, but some can succeed.
So if Singapore can't produce the next Google, what can it produce? Lee stated, "How do we go further up? By not competing with Chinese and Indians where we know they're going to enter in a big way. We succeed by staying in little niches, securing qualities which they cannot match, like credibility, reliability, intellectual property, and the rule of law. They cannot match that for a long time."
Okay, we don't have the critical mass to be manufacturers of the best things in the world. We don't have the critical mass to be the top innovators. What are our competitive advantages? It seems to me, listening to you, it's our ability to gather the right infrastructure, the rule of law, the system of governance. Are these attributes enough to keep us
Supposing
going?
you don't have those attributes.
No, now that we have those.
What would happen to you?
But are these enough to
What
keep
would
us
happen
going?
to us?
Are these
No.
enough to keep us going?
No. These are the basics which differentiate us from our neighbors. So, what have we got to offer? Cheaper labor, cheaper land? No. Higher quality supporting structures to justify the higher costs.
Ma'am, you've made all of us very depressed.
No, I am not depressed. I'm realistic. I say this is our capabilities. These are our capabilities. This is the competition that we face. And given what we have, our assets and our capabilities, we can still make a good living, provided we are realistic.
But despite Lee's realism, Singapore hasn't stopped trying. Decades of work have gone into transforming its culture, turning the island into one of the most attractive places on earth to build a business. Through a mix of tax incentives, massive venture capital networks, and an aggressive hunt for global talent, it has become a genuine regional hub for innovation. Even Kevin Alui, co-founder of the Indonesian giant GoTo, admitted that while Singapore is small, its economic density is unmatched. To him, the city-state isn't just a market, it's a concentration of high-velocity spending power that acts as a vital engine for any company looking to dominate the region.
As you can see in Singapore's case, Singapore is 1% of Southeast Asia population, but it contributes 23% of Grab's revenue. Indonesia has 40% of population, but it contributes 29%. Now, Yes, Indonesia is still the biggest market, but it's a lot more people to capture a lot less value, right? So again, Indonesia is an absolutely critical, important, largest market in Southeast Asia. Absolutely. But if you can go to Singapore, you should try and win Singapore.
So, will Singapore produce the next Google? Probably not anytime soon, because Lee also had another idea for Singapore. You see, he understood that countries that had a more enterprising spirit also has extreme levels of inequality.
There is an obverse side to a dynamic entrepreneurial economy. The same GEM study found that in Denmark and Finland in the early 1990s, the total income controlled by the wealthiest 20% of the population divided by the total income controlled by the poorest 20% was 3.6. In other words, a fairly egalitarian society. In the United States, it was 9.4. 3.6 against 9.4. For over 30 years, we in Singapore have aimed for an egalitarian society. If we want to have more successful entrepreneurs, Singaporeans must accept a greater income disparity between the successful and the not so successful.
However, Lee also understood that it was a balance. He wasn't interested in a society defined by a handful of entrepreneurs running the show, while the rest of the population is left behind. To Lee, replicating the culture of America's entrepreneurial spirit would lead to a fractured society.
You have Bill Gates, or John Chalmers of Cisco, or you look up Forbes or Fortune or whatever, and there are 50 of the best and the brightest and the wealthiest. That's your experience. That's not China's experience. That's not our experience. Yes, we also now want to try and get our little Bill Gates going. But in the context of keeping our society solid so that we will survive as a people.
But here's the irony that Lee himself never quite articulated, though he perhaps embodied it better than anyone. The story of Singapore itself is arguably one of the greatest entrepreneurial acts of the 20th century. A man with zero resources, surrounded by hostile powers, leading a population with no reason to believe in his vision. He looked at the world and decided to build something anyway. He and his team did it with a relentless, almost maniacal focus on carving out a position in the global market that no one else could touch. While Singapore may not produce the next Google, it did something arguably harder. It built a country from nothing that became the most successful startup story in modern history. And the man who founded it, perhaps the greatest entrepreneur the world has ever produced. He just never called himself one.
Being entrepreneurial does not mean only starting big new companies. Every new business, however small, that fills a need is an enterprise that adds to our dynamism.